we'll definitely link all those resources for our listeners, because yes, absolutely. Like I said to you before we started, it is actually quite addictive. So I'm going to put that out there. Like, if you don't have a couple hours, when you start, you might miss some appointments or, forget about the world for a while because
Yeah.
the nuance and just really it is mind blowing to hear a scholar speak about this book that was written 1400 years ago or more, um, in modern terms, in conceptual terms that we can actually use and sink our teeth into. And I think that's one of the beautiful things also about the Quran is that it meets you where you're at. So, while Grace and I might be talking about something that 20 years into our convert journeys, you may be like, what?
Yeah.
you know,
And that's okay. Yeah.
eventually, inshallah, the more you engage with it, the more you get out of it. So,
Absolutely.
and I actually wanted to circle back to that part where you were talking about the hands and the feet testifying, because I was actually thinking about this recently. Unfortunately, my mother-in-law has been sick lately, and she does all these extra sunnah, and she sees it as her work now that she's retired, to
Mm-hmm.
do all these extra prayers, and it's wonderful and beautiful, but at the expense of her body sometimes.
Mm.
And so we were really sitting there thinking about this, and it just hit me like a bolt of lightning. Well, your hands and your feet are also going to testify about how you treated them. Your body is a trust from Allah. And part of the beauty of Islam is being a balanced human being.
Yeah.
We were told in many examples where the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, pointed to that middle road. If you can stand a couple hours in prayer at night, alhamdulillah. But if this is going to put an undue stress on you or cause you harm, in that case, why are you doing it? Allah doesn't need that from you. So I just wanted to see if the professor had run into, or yourself had run into any scholars who have thought about it in this, in terms of, yes, of course, your hands and feet and your eyes know what you've seen and done, but they're also a trust from Allah. So this is something they will testify to. How did you treat them?
Yeah. I mean, of course, I think, well, first, just to say, we, like, when you start hearing things like, okay, your hands and your feet will testify against you. I mean, I guess this is a good example of like not being literal, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's like
Mm-hmm.
not your hands are not going to develop lips and start talking, but
Right.
like the point is it's a holistic view. It's like, yeah, how did you take care of your body? What did you do with the body that God gave you? Because your body is a trust, right? I mean, God gave you your body, and you have to take care of it as a trust from God. As everything else, like your money and your family, everything in your life is from God. And so, and in terms of like prayer, like God doesn't need our prayer. The prayer is really for us, but I think the point
Mm-hmm.
is to build that relationship. And so if you're doing a ritual act because you feel that um, somehow that is that the act itself is what's praiseworthy, or what's that's actually not. I think I've heard the professor say many times that it's, you could end up praying like a gazillion prayers, but if it doesn't change like what's in your heart, your orientation, your actions, towards your kindness towards others. I mean, there are people who pray and then they're like mean, they're not kind, they're not generous, they're not merciful. um, so this is a religion that is not, unfortunately, counter to what it may seem. It's not about the ritual acts as much as it is about the transformation of your soul, right, and your insides, and
Mm-hmm.
how
Mm-hmm.
you develop a loving, intimate relationship with God. How what that means for what your role is in your world. Like how do you affect goodness or change, or stand up for justice, or are kind to your kids, or take help take care of your neighbor, or I mean, how do you embody this, this beauty and
Islam.
divinity, right? Islam. And so it's, if, um, and again, and yes, it does include, like, how do you, if you're praying, and standing 2 hours a night, but then you're hurting, it's hurting your physical well-being, then, rationally speaking, that really doesn't make sense. But if
Doesn't make
you,
sense, right?
yeah, but if that, if between you and God, if that brings you closer to God, okay, well, who am I to tell you you can't do that, right? Only you know it's between you
Mm-hmm.
and God. But if you're doing this because you think God wants you to exert yourself to the point of pain, no. And then I would say, no, that's not
Right.
the point, right? So,
And that's never been part of our Islamic tradition, whereas in, Judeo-Christian traditions, you can find the self-flagellation and all this
right,
kind of, that's
no,
not. And I think that's also something that people coming from a Judeo-Christian background sort of take for granted at some point, and I've not heard it talked about a lot. So I think it is important to stress, while they are part of one monotheistic tradition, Islam has many different points from the beliefs and the traditions that someone from a Judeo-Christian background would be used to. And I think along my journey, that was a big awakening for me, because when you hear religion talked about these days, especially, it's just a polarized discussion. Okay, monotheistic traditions, and then, atheist or agnostic or whatever else you're going to talk about. So we kind of get grouped in with Judeo Christians, but I really don't think that's necessarily a good reflection of where we stand, Um,
I mean, well, so we understand as Muslims that this is a continuing message, right? It started from the
mhm,
very beginning. So we all believe in, from Adam to, Prophet Abraham, Noah, Jesus, all the prophets in between. I mean, it's all the same God. It's all the same message. The prophets brought the same message to their people. With Judaism and Christianity, the message was not preserved as it was originally, delivered.
mhm,
And Muslims, when we received the message, humanity um, had matured, like, to a point where we were able to receive the message with the ability, one, to intellectualize it and also write it down. So, in the time of Moses and Jesus, um, this was the age of miracles, right? This was the age of magic and superstition,
mhm,
and
mhm,
miracles work for the people who see the miracle, but after time it just becomes folklore, right?
mhm,
So,
mhm,
with the Islamic message, it's like God was basically saying, okay, we are moving beyond the age of the miracle. You've
mhm,
progressed enough now. Now the Quran is your miracle, and your intellect. You have the ability now to use reason, and then this is the first time that we've actually had a revelation fully, captured, and preserved. And God promised that that the Quran would be preserved over time. So humanity evolved, but that doesn't change the fact that we're all connected. It's the same message of
mhm.
monotheism, the same message of the prophets, and so yeah. So you'll find so much continuation and connection, um, and I think it's beautiful that, I mean, for me as a convert, like, one of the things that was the most compelling was the message that, there are going to be Jews, Christians, Muslims, all kinds of people that make it to heaven. And so
Absolutely.
there was a space for, this answered a question for me. What about all the beautiful people that are not Muslim and will never be Muslim? And then when
Mhm,
you realize, well, that's not the plan. The point was not for everyone to be Muslim, counter to what
mhm,
a lot of Muslims might think. Um,
mhm,
and that, it's God's business who's going to go to heaven. It's not our business. And,
mhm.
God is ultimately fair, just, merciful. It's just our job to do the best while we can, on this earth, and to follow, the divine principles, try to be godly people. Um, and, we leave the rest to God. And so, we're human beings, and I think, God gave us an intuitive sense of what's right and what's just, even for people who never would have exposure to the Quran. You have a
Hmm.
sense of what's right and what's wrong. It's your choice whether you pursue that or not. And I trust God will ultimately be fair and beautiful, and so
Inshallah.
inshallah.
Inshallah. Yeah. So I think that's a good point to make, is that, when you're listening to scholars and they don't have that humility or that preface of, well, this is what I've found, this is my scholarship, this is how I interpret this, but obviously there's room
Yeah.
for other people, you really should be suspect. And there are quite a few scholars out there who will, you know, make you feel like it's the hammer, the gavel,
Yeah.
like this is it,
Right. Right.
haram, halal, like these are very hot terms that people like to use.
Yeah.
And I get it. As human beings, binary is the easiest for us. But I think the stress here is that, and what you're proving with Project Illumine is that there's so much. There's
There's
so
so
much
much.
meaning.
Yeah.
It's like mining for diamonds. It takes time, it takes effort, um, to hit that right spot. So, as somebody exploring Islam, or newly converted to Islam, it's always important to be aware of the fact that a Muslim scholar is worth his weight in salt if he prefaces, or she prefaces, this is how I've come about this understanding of a particular verse or a particular source. Without that, I'd really be wary and hesitant.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of people who are very quick to assume the role of scholar and try and convince, especially converts who don't know very much, but other Muslims too. I mean, just like, oh, everything has to do with the right text, the right evidence, well, where's your proof
Mhm.
for that? And that is really, for someone who doesn't, you're entering a space, it's very intimidating because you're like, well, I don't know these sources, and I guess, does everybody know these sources, and is this how
Mhm.
you claim authenticity? And honestly, like, the best advice I could give for anyone starting out is trust your heart and trust your instinct. And
Mhm.
all of that stuff is, it's suspect, right? So you just, I think that the most important thing is to build a relationship with God, talk to God, pray, like, make God your intimate partner and friend, like your best friend in everything. So
Mhm.
you're like talking to
Mhm.
God when you're driving in the car, you're shopping, every little thing, turn to God and talk to God, and invite God in. And that relationship, the more you invest in it, and a real relationship, not like God is far away and judging me, and if I don't do my prayer on time, or I don't have my hands in the right place, or I don't, if I have a hair coming out of my, that stuff is like God. Like, what's more important is the substance, like,
Absolutely.
the connection, and that is what's going to carry you. And so when you come across someone telling you something, and you're like, this doesn't really feel right, it doesn't sit right, then just set it aside and say, okay, I have to wait until I feel comfortable that this is something that I believe, is beautiful, that God would want, that, I mean, it's like, I think people have everything that they need to have a genuine, beautiful relationship, and to know what is right from wrong. And a lot of the
Mhm.
details that people try to confuse you with are kind of more, you know,
Minutia. It's just
yeah, it's minutia.
just.
Sometimes it's, power game. Sometimes people trying to impress you.
Mhm.
Whatever. I
Mhm.
mean, it's, and it's much easier to say this now, 28 years in, right? When you're starting
Yeah.
out, you're
Right.
just like, it's like, oh my God, everybody
Exactly.
knows everything. Like, I just assumed every Muslim was like brilliant and knew everything that I didn't know. I just assumed everyone was so much better than me. And you realize it's just like anything else. Human beings, there are all kinds, and you have to forge your own way, and do what you feel comfortable with between you and your God, because ultimately it's you and God.
Mhm. Mhm. And it's your. I think that's important. Because if you get too literalistic and if you sweat too much about the minutia, you are going to lose the beauty in the big picture. And it's hard. It is very hard to stick to. You know, I
Yeah.
know as a new convert, you want to be right. You want to be doing the right thing, quote unquote. Um, but when you get to those little issues, you know, there are a lot of right ways to do it, in my opinion, or a lot of ways to do them. You know,
Yeah.
there might be a better way or a best way. But God knows your heart and your intention. And I think that is one of the most powerful things about your relationship with God and the Quran is that as long as you're intending to do the right thing, right? We're told we're given better than what we're doing.
Yeah.
Um, this is a basic Islamic principle.
And it's
So if you
important.
have that intention to be right, even if, you know, your action is not 100%, let's say, Allah is going to give you what your intention was.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that just to start, it's really like prayer is really important, not for God, but for your own like habit making and for your own investment. Like I even like I
Hmm.
I tell
Absolutely.
my son, it's like this is sort of like your investment in your bank account, right, with God. And even if you don't feel it, like a lot of times people are sort of hung up with like, oh, I don't feel anything when I pray. I pray, it didn't do anything for me. It's not. You might not feel anything for a long time, but it's habit forming, and there's a reason for it, and it will, like, the more you put in it, the more you'll get out of it. And
Hmm.
it's a beautiful act. It's something that you can't really describe until you've done it for a while and you understand. And even if you do it wrong, but just even like to do it, 5 times a day. And yes, it sounds like a lot, but it's really not. Just to get yourself in that practice, and then fasting the best that you can, and trying to just have God with you in your mind and everything that you do. I think these
Hmm.
are, it's habit forming. And it's like I saw this really good quote recently about how you decide. It's not that you decide your future, it's that you decide your habits, and your habits form your future, or something like that. And I was like, yeah, that's
Absolutely.
actually really
Absolutely.
true. And so these are really powerful ways to bring divinity into your life. And you need that, especially with how dark the world is.
Absolutely. Living divinity, you know, breathing,
Exactly.
living,
Yeah.
you know, flawed as you will be, you know, just the striving, the intention. It's the
Yeah.
whole crux of the matter.
It's so
Because you will
it's
not be the same person the first day you became a Muslim that you are on the 28th year that you are a Muslim. It's just not the way it works in life.
it's so interesting.
So,
Like, I've found that a lot of times converts, are extremely high IQ, high emotional IQ. There's a really strong strain of perfectionism, right? And
hmm.
these are some of the things that bring people to Islam. And in addition to that, I think divine intervention, especially in this day and age. Like, people often have an experience that, like, something happens where you understand, like, okay, this was kind of a message for me.
Hmm.
And and so it's funny because, like, I mean, I fall into the perfectionism camp where it's like you just want to do everything right, you just want to, like, and you want
Just
to get
tell
it
me what it is
perfect.
and I will
Yeah,
do it. Yes.
exactly. And so it's like anything else, you can be your perfectionism can paralyze you, and you just got to be kind,
Absolutely.
and you got to be
Absolutely.
patient, but do your best to just keep going. Because the thing that's really beautiful about people who well, I think honestly, it's like as I said, God chooses people to convert. It's a gift. I mean, to me, it's like the greatest gift I was ever given. Is that converts have zeal and passion, and that is something that um, is that oftentimes people who are born into this faith will never experience. And
Hmm.
this is what it's going to take to make Islam beautiful and you know and amazing. Like, what we're charged with being on the forefront of everything. Good. If things were right, Muslims would be the best of everything. and
Hmm.
and we're not there, but I think converts can get us there. And you just have to make sure that you're kind to yourself and patient, But invest your time wisely and doing the things that help elevate you, your spirit, your mind, your soul, your sense of goodness, justice, and everything else that kind of undermines that, you can set it aside and just, it's like anything else. You focus on what is right and put your time into
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's so important to have that grace with yourself, Grace.
Right.
And obviously, we could sit here and talk for hours and hours and hours about the Quran and all the beautiful ways it has changed and transformed us. And if you're interested in listening to more of what Grace has put out here, please go to their website, usuliinstitute.org, correct?
Usuli.org.
Oh, usuli.org.
Yeah, usuli.org. And also, and actually there's another website that focuses on my husband's work too, which is also in the same methodology, same approach that was in existence before Usuli, but that's at searchforbeauty.org. And again, just the idea that, it's a very simple heuristic. It's like, if it's beautiful, then, God loves beauty. If it's ugly, it cannot be by definition of the divine. So if you see something that is ugly morally, ethically, that that's not something that is worthy of God, or that God would want for us as human beings. And this is just a very simple way of understanding what can be authentic and not to Islamic practice and Islam.
Right. Easy litmus test.
Yes,
things.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes, I agree 100%. It is complex, but it is so simple at the same time.
Exactly. Exactly.
Like most things in life, it has that conundrum to it.
Right. It takes work.
Well, thanks. Yes, yes, definitely.
And
Thank you
dogs are
for
okay.
taking.
Can I didn't want to give my last minute plug for dogs. You don't have to give up your dogs. Dogs are creatures of God.
Yes, that's a very actually
Yes.
it's very important to mention. And we had been talking about it, and maybe it could blow into a whole episode. I'm sure.
Yeah, we should talk. Yeah, that would be great. But just don't believe what Muslims tell you about dogs not being allowed. We have so many rescue dogs, and they live with us in our home, and they're beautiful creatures that are examples to humanity of how to be kind and loving and forgiving, and just a source of light. So don't give up your dogs if you're converting, and don't believe when people tell you have to.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah, well, Grace, we should probably tell them at one point how many dogs you had. So I think that's a very relevant fact.
Well, it's like a crazy story, and so we kind of got very excited about rescuing dogs, and once we entered the animal shelter scene, we realized how desperate dogs needed to be rescued. So we have a kind heart, and too much so we ended up, between our own willingness to take dogs and our friends who would find dogs and couldn't keep them, we ended up at one point with 28 dogs in our home. And over time, we did. Now I have a single-digit number, so it's like alhamdulillah. But
a little bit quieter.
Yeah, it's much quieter. But it was really trying to help save dogs, help find them homes. A lot of times, your intentions don't work. Your actions don't work out the way you think, and so you end up falling in love with dogs and keeping them. But alhamdulillah, it's like if there's anyone worth saving, I think animals, dogs, they're just, so beautiful, beautiful creatures and full of love. They're just pure love, honestly. And, and they deserve, like, our care. So, yeah, no regrets.
Absolutely. And the only thing that is fuller in Grace's house than animals is
books.
How many books do you have, Grace?
We have over 100,000 books in our house. Yeah. It's a lifetime's work.
For a good Islamic library, Grace can open up her front doors for you. But mashallah, it really reflects in the work that you guys do. And just briefly, because we are getting on long here, how do you have like a really succinct way that you can explain how the dog situation came about, and what it's based off of and why that is inaccurate?
I mean, my husband did a lot of the research because, obviously, dogs are quite vilified. And a lot of it was for political reasons, power reasons. It's a complex issue, as most everything is. Don't believe it when people tell you that it's black and white. It's like everything else. Humans, life, humanity, everything is complex and nuanced. But after, so since people are interested in evidence, my husband did all of the scholarly research and, you know, concluded, and it actually has talked about it, so you can find videos about him explaining more of the methodology on the searchforbeauty.org website, or you can do a YouTube search on dogs in the Islamic tradition. My husband, Khalid Abu El Fadl, and he goes into depth about that. But I mean, anyone who spends any time with a dog will know that this creature is magical,
Beautiful, like what you were
beautiful,
saying.
divine,
Right.
truly
Mm-hmm.
pure love. And
Mm-hmm.
God, how could God create a creature like this and then allow human beings to, subject them to horrible things, even just, inhumane treatment, or just lack of care?
Mm-hmm.
That is ugly, and that simply cannot be.
Very.
It's
Yes.
immoral
Yes.
and unethical. So, these are things that can
And
easily be reached through your own just rational faculties. No one has to tell you through evidence.
right, right. But it's not in the Quran. There's nowhere in the Quran that says anything about dogs.
Well, no, I mean, dogs are in the Quran, right? There's a story of the cave where the prophet was hiding and there were dogs in front. So, I mean, nothing negative at all about dogs
Right,
in the
right,
Quran. So,
absolutely. There's
yeah.
no chronic backing for the
No.
attitude,
Abs-
which is
no, because,
one of the most perplexing things.
yeah, I mean, the Quran continually emphasizes, we have to be caretakers of creation, everything in creation, whether it's the animals, the environment,
Absolutely.
everything, other human beings, everything has rights. And,
Hmm.
we have to honor those rights. If we deny anything that has its right, that's a sin.
Hmm.
So, dogs have rights, animals have rights, the environment has rights, as human beings do.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's part of your worship, you know. I
absolutely.
think a lot of people don't think of it that way, but your everyday actions, your habits are your way of worshiping Allah too, you know?
That it's actually
Um,
front and center. We just were talking about this in our latest Holocaust concern set. Is really everything can be distilled down to the rights you give and you owe others, and the rights that are owed to you. So, for example, even if you have a right to speak and someone interferes with your right to speak, or you have a right to be fed, you have a right to be educated, someone doesn't allow you, your right to shelter. These are sins. I mean, this is
mhm,
our
mhm.
responsibility, is to be, very actively aware of the rights we owe others, as well as, the rights to ourselves. That so it's a picture of justice, human rights, beauty, morality, ethics. It's all encompassing. It's universal.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for taking the time, Grace, to let us in on the latest project. And you did say it was going to be available, inshallah, in either a book or a digital format so that people
Yes.
could read.
Right. So right now we are, recording all of our classes that are online. So they're, lengthy classes. We transcribe all of that. We're going to edit it, and it takes a process to turn something from, spoken word to a finished, professional product with citations and all of that. So, but we have people working really, diligently on that, and that is hopefully going to be our legacy. We have a new book actually, that's going to be published by Usuli Press, coming out within the next, hopefully, month or two, inshallah. We're trying to get it out before Ramadan. And that's usulipress.org, which is in the making right now. But so yeah, eventually this entire collection, the entire commentary on every single chapter, will be published, inshallah. But it's a lot of work, so it'll take a little bit of time. But we're hoping to do it in bits and pieces, so we can let you know more when they're available. But in the meantime, if you just want to listen to the classes, they're available for free on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. So you can just search up Usuli Institute, Usuli Institute, on YouTube.
And subscribe and support them
Yes,
because
right.
they're awesome. And it's a really, really, it is a fantastic project for Ramadan. Instead of plowing through the Arabic, which you might not be
Yeah,
that attached to, just pick a surah, pick one, pick
pick
two. I
one.
don't know what you can get through in Ramadan, but to have your heart opened
Yeah,
by the Quran instead of just
absolutely. And
um,
and
what it
we
what do you say? You say not it's not the amount, but the quality. So really
yeah,
engage.
I think even if I mean we the other thing we do is we do weekly virtual khutbas.
Hmm.
So this started actually a year before the pandemic because I know people were a lot of people were frustrated by the experience at the mosque. Khutbas oftentimes didn't seem to really be relevant to life, or were kind of the same messages. They're just were not very inspired. And so the khutbas that we give are will knock your socks off because they really engage with the world, with the Quran, with a lot of injustice. It speaks truth to power. And actually, this is the first book that we are going to be publishing as a collection of those. But every Friday, you can either watch live stream or you can see the recordings too. These are really educational, powerful, inspirational khutbas given by Dr. Abul Fadl. Um, and yeah, so that's on our either through our channel or our website. You can find those as well. So just try one. I mean, check it out, see what you think, see if it strikes you in a way that is interesting, and then hopefully that'll open the door. So,
Inshallah.
inshallah. Thank you so
Well,
much for having me. This has been really fun.
absolutely. And we might have to have you back. We opened some cans of worms here in this episode that might need
Absolutely. I'm happy to
might
come
need
back
undoing.
anytime. Yeah, anytime.
Alhamdulillah. And thank you, listeners, for joining us for another podcast episode. Again, if you have any questions about what you've heard, we will have show notes. So there will be resources there to link to the Usuli Institute and their YouTube channel and the searchforbeauty.org, all the beautiful things that they've been doing. And I can say, one of the greatest books I've read in my life that really kind of changed it from being kind of an immature convert to more mature in my thinking was The Great Theft that Professor Abul Fadl has written. And I highly recommend that book if you want to understand, the framework Islam is being put in this world, unfortunately, right now. But as always, I am wishing you what is better.
Kristen?
Oh, yes, yes.
Sorry, I'm gonna. If I could add to your book recommendation,
Oh, absolutely.
because the other book that's really special is actually called The Search for Beauty in Islam, also by my husband, A Conference of the Books, and I think for
Hmm.
particularly for it's based on real stories, Muslims in the American experience. I think that you in particular would really love that, and then from that to the latest book, which is actually it's more advanced, but at some point is really important. Reasoning with God, reclaiming Sharia in the modern age. So
Yes, yes.
these are all like a string of books, but Search for Beauty is a really easy read. It's like stories and inspiring, and really builds on the themes of what we were talking about today. So I would highly recommend
Yes,
that too.
yes, yes. I remember at least skimming through that one. So yes, I
Sorry to
think
interrupt.
you're right. For a younger, a newer Muslim, yes. Start with Search for Beauty and then maybe move on. But honestly though, any of Professor Abul Fazl's work and of Grace's work as well is very inspiring and will definitely get you to think differently about things. So,
Thank you.
um, again, we feel blessed to have had Grace Song, the executive director of the Usuli Institute, with us today. And inshallah, we will have many more episodes with her.
Inshallah. Thank you so
Uh,
much.
you're welcome. And as always, I'm wishing you what is better. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.